Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Muskan, coordinator of Cracking IT Jobs. Welcome to ChatGPT using coding of Cracking IT Jobs. So, students, this is the first batch of JavaScript Basic from your college, and we are very excited and to start this journey. So, let me introduce the my seniors who are present here. First of all, Mr. Ochishman Shorkar, who is an IITian, and he will guide you throughout this session. And then we have Mr. Falguni Chatterjee, who is the lead developer of Race Technology and Cracking IT Jobs. And he will teach JavaScript and make things more easier for you. And then last and not the least, Mr. Shudeep Paja, who is the project manager of Cracking IT Jobs. So students, we are very excited to have you here, and over to you, Mr. Falguni Chatterjee, and we should start this class.
All right, guys, good morning. Hope everyone is doing well. So, today we are starting our first batch with your college, your ideal engineering college. And this is the JavaScript basic first batch. And we have with us Mr. Orchisman Sarkar. He is IITian. Along with, he is not just IITian, he is in Honeywell as a tech lead, and he has various expertise like reactjs, JavaScript, lot of technologies. He is an expert, so you can have all the questions asked to him, and whatever doubts you have you can ask him. I'll be there with you guys throughout this course. Any doubts you have you can ask me also. So okay, so I hope you guys enjoy it, and let's begin. Over to Mr. Orchisman.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Falguni. That was a really good introduction. So, hello everyone. I hope you all are doing really good, well today. And I understand it's a weekend, but still, yeah, of course, when we are in some training, we have to spare a couple of hours free time so that we get trained. So, today I'm going to discuss everything, not everything, a little bit about JavaScript and more about ChatGPT, how you can use it on your day-to-day life or day-to-day work so that you can enhance your skills. So, whatever you have uh, learned so far in your college regarding JavaScript is most probably using some outdated resources, or it does not have much explanation on how things really work in a large-scale industry or in an enterprise-grade environment. So that's where I'm coming in to explain like what all components are important in that purpose, so that at least if you all can have an initial knowledge about it, or like how things actually work in industry, you would be able to crack any sort of interviews, job interviews, or any sort of coding related tests with much more confidence. So yeah, I'll start with sharing my screen. So yes, let's get started. So why do we want to use ChatGPT for learning JavaScript? Anybody has any idea about ChatGPT? Like, obviously, it's a very new technology that has been launched recently, and quite a lot of wars are going between big tech players like Google and Facebook as well for bringing out their own format of language translation models. But yeah, anybody has any idea about ChatGPT? Just you can speak up. There's no restriction in that. Or yeah, if nobody has, then I'll just explain. Okay, seems like nobody is that much aware of ChatGPT, so I'll explain it. So, yeah, ChatGPT is basically a transformer-based machine learning model. What is a transformer-based machine learning model? It's something which gets a lot of data. It takes in initially a lot of text data as input and does some sort of learning and accordingly updates that specific model so that it can give out a much more useful and human-like response. So currently what happens is whenever anybody tries to use ChatGPT, they would write some questions and they would be getting an answer. But ChatGPT is just another machine or a system which does not have sentience like human as of yet. So there are quite a lot of scenarios wherein if you ask ChatGPT a single question, you would be getting an answer which might not be that much correct. So you need to validate that specific thing and keep on asking and mastering the skill of prompt engineering. So it's like the more you are able to communicate or converse with this AI tool, the better results you would get. And of course, ChatGPT is something like, suppose you are planning to use it in a very critical situation, like suppose you want to write a mail to somebody and you just ask ChatGPT to write your mail. So ChatGPT can do that as well, but it's finally up to you. Like you need to validate whatever content has been generated by ChatGPT is valid enough or makes sense. So there are quite a lot of situations which have been reported recently where people are trying to write cover letters using ChatGPT, but that is a really clever trick, but I think that fails in the most of the cases because people are not at all validating what content is coming out from ChatGPT. So it really makes no sense if you're not validating anything, validating the output of ChatGPT and just sending it as it is. You should always make sure that anything you get as an answer, you need to validate that, be it a text, be it any sort of code snippets you're getting, and any sort of responses like that. So that's about it of ChatGPT in a nutshell. So I'll be explaining mostly in this session about what, like how JavaScript can be learned using ChatGPT in a much more better and efficient way. And also I'll give a very high level overview of like what all components are there, which needs to be kept in mind whenever you are writing any JavaScript code. And of course, if you're writing any industry standard or professional grade code, there are quite a lot of things which you need to keep in mind while creating those sort of things. So there are a couple of components for JavaScript, like testing the code which you have written programmatically, also debugging the code if anything breaks. So those are the couple of things which I'll be discussing at the end of the session. So first, let's have a look at what all benefits we get while we learn JavaScript using ChatGPT. So okay, so what were we in? So we were discussing about like the benefits of learning JavaScript using ChatGPT. So this was just an overview of like what all benefits are there whenever you're learning JavaScript using ChatGPT. So this is the URL. I'll be going into this URL once I go through this PPT, and of course give a hands-on experience on like how you can learn stuff about JavaScript in a much more detailed way. The next slide is like, of course, these are the couple of benefits I'm going to discuss. So whenever you are using ChatGPT, you can learn the entire content or whatever content you feel like at your own pace and schedule. It is not time bound, and of course you can continuously learn in your free time. And as it is a AI model available over the public internet, so you can access it from anywhere, anytime. And yeah, ChatGPT, of course, is not fully perfect as of yet. It's still learning, but it has learned quite a lot. And apart from that, there's quite a lot of software infrastructure which is supporting this specific AI model and providing it to the customer, various clients, whoever is trying to use it. So there are instances where this specific framework, the machine learning framework, fails to respond back. So it throws some error. So you will be seeing that quite a lot of times whenever you're trying to ask any questions in ChatGPT for a long period of time, and that you left that specific application idle for some time and came back. And whenever you ask once again, it would be responding back with an error. So it's just you need to refresh the window, after which it will automatically get restored back to how it was initially. So yeah, next one is interactive. So as much questions you ask, you will get an instant feedback for that. So it's all about prompt engineering. Like, okay, you have asked one question, you have got one response. You're not happy with that response. You want much more details or much more depth in that specific response. You ask further question, counter question. So the more counter questions you ask to this AI model, it will get better over the period of time and keep on giving you answers, which would be the most suitable one, of course. And yeah, this was about the interactiveness of the specific task. Personalized learning is another thing which is really crazy about ChatGPT. So based on your learning, like suppose you're working on a specific task which requires a specific set of functionality, and that is an absolutely new new type of strategy which needs to be used, which you are not aware of. So based on your task, you can personalize your question in such a way so that it is capable of giving you back answers specific to that task. But of course, always make sure whenever you're getting any code snippets out from ChatGPT for a specific task, make sure that you understand how it works. You go through it, run it multiple times, see whether it's passing all the required test scenarios or not, and then proceed. So yeah, access to resources. So using ChatGPT, you have an access to a wide variety of resources. ChatGPT has been trained for nearly about 5 or 6 years, which in that span of time, ChatGPT has been constantly scraping the web, getting lots and lots of information. It went through lots and lots of storybooks or various sort of movies and stuff like that, and it gathered all that content together into one trained model. So it has been trained on a huge data set, and so you indirectly have access to all those data set. Earlier, the obviously currently also maybe you all are using Google. You might be Googling quite a lot during your work hours or during your assignment submission. But Googling is something which gives you all the resources raw, after which you go through each and every resources, compile the final output, like what it should be, hit and trial, quite a lot of things. And after that, you come to a solution. But of course, that will take quite a lot of time. Here, ChatGPT is coming to our rescue to give us the same type of response without losing so much of time. So everything is compiled, everything is summarized, and the whatever question you ask, it gives you back reply to the point. So ChatGPT has another feature, like suppose you want to get a code snippet written out and you want it to be written for a specific example. So you feed in that example as well, maybe the input data type, data input type or data input content, and you ask the ChatGPT based on this example, give me a optimized coding solution. So that way it'll also give you the most optimized solution as well. Cost effective, of course, it is cost effective because you need not spend extra money on textbooks or commuting or like other accommodation fees and all, because everything has been learned by ChatGPT and you're efficiently using it. So yeah, and up to date is something which is quite hard if you are Google, if you have to Google constantly, because you always never know like what all new things have come in and what all to compile and understand. So ChatGPT comes to a rescue as well for that purpose. So whenever you feel like uh, getting up to date and with the latest trend or latest technological advancement in JavaScript, you can just go to ChatGPT and ask what are the newest trends, newest achievements, and it will give you a summarized answer. But yeah, make sure that it's not about making sure from your side. It's somewhat like that model has been trained till 2021 end. So whatever data it has, it's prior to 2021. So absolute updation is not yet possible, but of course, ChatGPT is evolving over the period of time, and each and every newly updated things would also get incorporated over the period of time. So yeah, and of course, career advancement. So in this competitive job market, like learning just the basics of any sort of technology stack is not um, it's not much favorable for the employers, because whenever you are learning any sort of stack, it's just the basics you are learning. Maybe data structure and algorithm is something which you're focusing quite a lot on, and that is also something which is used to screen initially. But you can but obviously I have worked in industry for 4.5 years so far, and I also did come in with data structure and algorithms during my coding test. But that is still the coding test. After I got inside the company, it does not use any sort of data structure algorithms related stuff, and it's mostly like advanced level things going on for the stack which needs to be implemented and needs to be worked on. So you need to focus on DS algo, but apart from that, majorly also you need to focus on how systems are being designed, what all components are there in any sort of system, and how to make your code much more cleaner, efficient, so that it can be made an enterprise grade product, because enterprise grade product is very much different to whatever simple POC code we write in during our college days. It's like for college coding assignments, it's just about getting the job done. But whenever you're writing an enterprise grade code, it's not about just getting the job done. It's also about how reliable your code is, how good your code would be running over really, really huge sets of data when it comes in or under stress, or like how much fault tolerant it is, how it can recover itself. So those sort of things are the key parts which are focused mostly in big industries. So earlier, the trend during job interviews was mostly asking, for the freshers, was mostly asking data structure and algorithm questions. But nowadays, the trend is shifting quite a lot, wherein the employers are mostly interested in knowing whether you understand how a full software development lifecycle works. So, full software development lifecycle starts from inception of the idea, taking that entire development through multiple iterations to make it much more efficient and much more uh, compatible as per the end user requirements. And so, it, to summarize it all, it's like ChatGPT is very flexible, it's interactive, it's cost effective, and also it helps you learn at much more faster rate to advance any sort of skills in coding and career. So yeah, that was it about the basics of like why we'll be using ChatGPT to learn JavaScript. Anybody has any questions so far? I'll just give 2 or 3 minutes time to speak up if anybody wants to, or else I'll be moving on to the next task after this. Okay, so no questions. Then I'll just go to the screen. So we'll do a couple of question answer game in here, and let's see how ChatGPT helps us out. Okay, so URL, I guess everybody knows already, or if somebody doesn't know, they can just Google ChatGPT, and this is the first URL you will get. Once you're obviously after signing in with your email ID, you'll be greeted with specific welcome screen. So yeah, let me start with asking a couple of questions. You can write any random question. It doesn't matter. It may not be grammatically entirely correct for that time being. You can even change it over the period of time as well. So yes, as you can see, it's immediately giving me an output like what all things JavaScript can do, like where it can be used, and like how it works and stuff like that. So yes, so suppose I want to continue this question answer game. So I'll be picking up this point and asking some couple of specific questions. Point three regarding web applications. It's giving me exact specific answers for that web application related query I had. So you can see how this is working, like what all type of frameworks are there on JavaScript which can be used to create web applications and for browsers as well as mobile devices. And of course, it's a versatile language which can be used over various other necessities or requirements over the period of time. Okay, so let me ask a couple of questions regarding how do we use JavaScript to develop web applications in much more detail. Okay. Okay, so suppose you know quite a lot of these points, you've gone through this or seen them earlier, but maybe suppose you are not aware of what this thing actually does. Cache by browser for faster page loading. So I'll once again write. Yeah, I'm getting an answer for that as well. So now I'm a bit interested in getting a code snippet, like which would be able to do all these things which are getting mentioned. So I'll ask for a code snippet. So this is a code snippet which will create a web application for calculation. As you can see, this is a form which will be having multiple input fields and not multiple, it will have just two input fields and one button to initiate the calculation. And finally, once the calculation is done, it will give you the result. So how is this JavaScript getting invoked? There's a calculate method which is getting called. So you can see this calculate method is present inside this script tag, which has been declared under head for the specific HTML script. So once the numbers come in, which are getting passed by, which are passed on by this input, it will give you an output, and that will be displayed here. So this is a pretty simple code which will be giving a desired output or maybe a sample web application. So I'll ask it to optimize it further. Let's see what it does. Okay. So as you can see, it did optimize, and it's also adding various reasoning or rationale behind what it did to optimize it. And as you can see, it is also using the specifics of caching, which I had just asked question about previously. And using caching, it is able to save quite a lot of memory in the flow as well. And it's also using an unary plus operator, which was missing out in the previous segment. So as you can see, this one earlier it was concatenating two together, like one after the other. But this is not so efficient way, like number one plus number two. But using a unary operator helps it to concatenate in a much more efficient way. And of course, it's finally checking and giving it an output. So yeah, it does have this one at the end, but then unary operator is used for the parsing of the float and for getting a better performance as well. So yeah, these were a couple of things about how to use JavaScript to learn. And I'll be going back to another presentation which would have everything organized so that we can proceed one by one with each and every topics which needs to be discussed on. So just quickly open that. Okay, so this is all about JavaScript basics, or maybe initial part of JavaScript which needs to be learned. So I've divided it into two segments. One is part one, which includes mostly the mostly stuff related to the object, or like how various variables and stuff like that are getting used in JavaScript. So As you can see, this topic mostly covers variables, data types, operators, control structures, functions, arrays, and objects. So one by one we'll go in. So it's just basic introduction on JavaScript, what it is and all. So each and every topic which you are seeing here, I'll be copy pasting those topics exactly into ChatGPT, and we'll go through the time what the ChatGPT answers, and also I'll be explaining you so that you can do it yourself as well when you're trying to learn it in a much more advanced level. There's a spelling mistake, but of course it could find it out. Yeah, so this is the exact same answer which we got earlier when I asked what is JavaScript, and maybe give me the basics of it. So as you can see, JavaScript is something which helps in manipulating the DOM or document object model present inside any HTML page or HTML content programmatically, so that the view or the final UI gets a change without the page being refreshed or anything like that. So it helps in dynamic real-time updates of the document object models. It's also responsible behind initiating multiple triggers based on what sort of input the user gives in. It could be some sort of mouse clicks or keyboard input, or any sort of interactive application related inputs. And next one is it helps in making various HTTP calls. So HTTP calls are something which is like you have a REST server on the being hosted on some VM or some cloud environment wherein it exposes just APIs, and you need to consume that specific API to get some data and use that data in order to render your view on the user interface. So JavaScript helps in that purpose, helps for that purpose as well. It uses Ajax or Axios or some other techniques which are readily available in the market as library packages. JavaScript is also responsible or helpful behind creating animations and various visual effects, which can also give some sort of fades and maybe sliding view or something like that. And apart from that, whenever you have any web application, it might be having some sort of form inputs wherein you enter all your details, and once you have entered your details, it needs to be validated to see whether the specific details being entered match as per requirements, or like they are following all the rules and all. So those sort of validation and stuff like that are also being done by JavaScript because it's more on the functional side. So here we have three parts whenever you're considering web application development. It's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML, you can consider it to be the skeleton if you try to draw some sort of analogy. CSS is the overall skin, and JavaScript is the muscular connections of the muscles inside that specific body. So yeah, JavaScript plays a huge role in making the outer appearance of the specific user interface look really good. Of course, CSS is there, but JavaScript is something which can also do the part of CSS as well, or do things programmatically wherein we don't need CSS files. So that is something which I'll discuss later on moving forward, but yeah, that's also something which is possible. It is also capable of creating some sort of rendering some sort of multimedia applications or multimedia content to the user interface. Suppose, for example, you have seen YouTube and all, right? It uses JavaScript behind the scenes, wherein it helps in rendering the video content, and of course, it is also capable of streaming huge video data over the period, which comes over the period of time, not everything at a shot, and rendering them one by one. So that is something which JavaScript is capable of. And and the final one is like JavaScript is also responsible or is capable of manipulating cookies or changing the local storage content. So what are cookies? Cookies are something which is being sent by any new website which you try to open. It gets stored in your browser, and based on your interaction with that website, earlier interaction, the cookie which got stored is being reused if you try to open that same web page once again. So yeah, it's also capable of manipulating the cookies. And finally, as you can see, it's responsible behind creating so many dynamic web applications that it is an absolutely versatile and powerful programming language, because it has various different frameworks which are used for creating elegant UIs and also creating very efficient backends using Node.js, and for the UI it's React. Okay, this was about JavaScript in brief. Anybody has any questions? If not, you may please ping in the chat and I'll proceed forward. Okay, if nobody has any questions, then I'll move on to this specific topic, which is the difference between client-side and server-side JavaScript, and how it is and how it is being used. Okay, so no questions. Let me proceed forward. Okay, so excuse me. So the question was like, we wanted to understand the differences between client-side and server-side JavaScript. So as you can see, the execution environment is different for both of them. Whenever you see any sort of client-side JavaScript, it's mostly web applications running on a browser user machine's browser. It could be Chrome, Firefox, Safari, anything. And server-side JavaScript is something which runs on the VM, any sort of cloud deployment environment where it has been deployed and will have to run continuously without any stops. Resource access is also different for both the cases. In case of client-side JavaScript, it really has a limited amount of resource to access from. So it's not at all similar to the amount of resource a server-side JavaScript can access. Server-side JavaScript has access to quite a lot of persistent systems like databases, various sort of other servers or file systems in the specific environment and all. So whenever any sort of web application gets created, it is always recommended that any sort of business logic or any sort of crucial logic which you think is needed to be added in the specific web application, you should always make sure that specific logic lies on the server side, so that the client side is not that much loaded. And of course, if it's too much loaded, it cannot run smoothly, and there would be lags in how the website gets rendered or how much time it takes to render and all those things. So server side, what are the benefits of keeping crucial business logics on the server side? The main benefit is like we are freeing the client side JavaScript application from quite a lot of quite a lot of heavy loading. So it's like right now it's a web application. It could be a mobile application as well. So in terms of mobile application, if you want the mobile application also to have somewhat similar functionality like it has for its web application counterpart, you cannot go on replicating the code at multiple places. Like you have suppose written a business logic for the web application, same business logic you are copy pasting and writing in for the mobile application. That's not at all recommended, and that's anti-pattern. So what you generally do is you keep all your logic on the server side and make it act as a single source of truth whenever any sort of client tries to access it. So yeah, that's about the resources, how it has access to performance. So yeah, as I've discussed previously, Performance is a big thing which we all need to consider whenever we are developing any sort of code. If we are planning to get that code into enterprise grade levels and get it into production so that users can use without any flaws and issues. Performance plays a huge role. So any sort of client-side application you write using JavaScript, you need to make sure that there are not many complex logics running on the specific application. Client applications are solely responsible for rendering really good UI or user experience, which can get hampered over the period of time if there is quite a lot of huge logic or algorithmic logic running in the client side as well. So make sure that all your algorithms or all your business logic are running on server, and you are freeing up the client basically from clogging up unnecessary resources on the user's system and getting the user frustrated. So quite a lot of thing about software development, it surrounds around how the user will feel once they're trying to use our product. So you have to think it from a user's perspective as well. Like you are a user of any product or any web application, suppose you get some sort of delay or it's laggy, it's not working that well. Obviously, you would get frustrated over the period of time and stop using that entirely. So that is something which any sort of developer needs to keep in mind. Like your product should be in such a state that it is always keeping the user engaged to it, and there are less exits for that specific application. Okay, so functionality wise, it's JavaScript does quite a lot of dynamic loading, or it can help in loading quite a lot of interactive charts, which can basically help you create really beautiful dashboards, which will be giving you control over each and every components, and accordingly you can move them around or do anything without refreshing the page. So JavaScript has quite a lot in that case as well. Earlier, it used to be server-side rendering, wherein the server was responsible behind generating the client codes, mostly HTML, CSS, and a bit of JavaScript, not that advanced one. And it used to continuously push that specific server-side rendered content to the browser whenever requested for. And with each and every click, that entire flow used to get repeated. The server used to regenerate it, it used to push back, and then the browser used to reload, and you would see the specific content. But with the advent of web application development using JavaScript, that thing has gone off entirely. So any sort of rendering or any sort of heavy task related to UI components are all done by JavaScript. So JavaScript main task here is for the client-side application is to render really beautiful UIs. And the last but not the least, it's all about the security. So suppose you have developed an application and that application is vulnerable. By vulnerable, what do I mean? It is prone to various sort of known security issues, which has already been exploited by hackers or cyber criminals in the past, but you fail to take care of that and implement all the required vulnerability mitigation fixes. So there are chances that your application might get hacked and things will go out of hand pretty soon. And of course, there would be a huge reputation loss whenever you are developing any sort of code which is vulnerable. So yeah, JavaScript is something which helps in mitigating various vulnerabilities which are already exposed in industry as per the security norms. So one of them is cross-site scripting, wherein the attacker is capable of injecting malicious code to the web page. So you can see, like, if you go to any sort of web page, you hit the inspect button, and in there you try to update any code. It does update for a while, but it will not take into effect because there is a JavaScript running, which will automatically re-render it back to the previous state, which it was when it is not modified. So JavaScript, as it is running continuously on the browser, it helps in mitigating that specific issue. So that way, it is way more better compared to any sort of server-side rendering, where the server-side rendering validation happens only if there is a new click added, or like a new click is done and things re-render and the server sends something back. So yeah, that's how it's also helping from security purpose as well. Okay, so anybody has any questions so far? If not, I'll proceed.
Guys, you should ask questions. Unless and until you ask questions, you won't be clear if you have any doubts or anything. So
Yeah,
please,
try to make this interactive. Like, just
yes,
speak
yes.
up if you have any questions. Don't
If
worry.
if you
Nothing.
feel
No
that
question is
it's
stupid.
dumb also, yeah, yeah, yeah.
No
If you
question is
feel it's
dumb or
dumb
stupid.
also, just ask questions. Don't just on mute. Don't be just on mute. Ask questions.
Okay, I can see
Sir,
Nikhil and Bhaskar writing no questions. Everybody else is in sync.
sir,
Yes.
sir, as you are saying about JavaScript,
Hmm.
I know that JavaScript is today the most efficient used language for backend
Yes.
as well as frontend. But
Hmm.
before that, for web development, it is necessary that we should learn at least HTML, na? Because that is the main structure. Na?
Yes, HTML you need to learn, but nowadays without even learning HTML basics, you should be learning. That I'll also be covering. But apart from that, as there are quite a lot of frameworks like React and all which have popped up, even without the knowledge of HTML, you can write really good, efficient code in just pure JavaScript. So React is something which takes care of all the sort of HTML manipulations behind the scene, and accordingly, you can also just focus more on developing the JavaScript part. So yes, I will be giving an intro about HTML and CSS in very brief moving forward. But of course, ChatGPT is always there for your help. Suppose you get stuck in anywhere related to HTML, you can ask questions. So I'll show how you can ask those specific questions. Any specific problem statement also I'll pick up, and we can just work on it to find solutions for an HTML way as well. So yes.
Sir, is it possible to design a website without the help of HTML these days?
Yes, it is possible. React, it has not entirely free of HTML, but you can design without touching HTML. There would be an index.html, which would be having just 2 or 3 lines of code in HTML, basically HTML script. And on top of it, there is the React framework, which takes care of all the document object manipulation. So basically, document object manipulation is the HTML structure. So you need not worry about how that specific thing gets modified or something like that. So when I learned React, I did not have too much of an idea on HTML because React was the very first thing which I started with. But over the period of time, I did not face any sort of issues because the HTML knowledge is like the more you work on any sort of JavaScript language, web application development, HTML will continuously keep on coming. So focus on HTML has reduced quite a lot over the period of time. Earlier days when it was server-side rendering, it was the focus was mostly on HTML and CSS. But now trends are changing quite a lot. So in industry, there is rarely you will have to touch the HTML part. It's mostly touching the CSS and the JavaScript part. So yes, I hope that answers your question. Or do you have any further doubts?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay. That was a really good question, I must say. Okay, so if nobody else has any other questions, I'll move over to this next part. So basic syntax and structure of JavaScript code. I'll ask that question as well. Okay, so yeah, as you can see, this is a comment in JavaScript, and it is a comment for quite a lot of other languages as well. This is how a variable gets declared. So it can use multiple keywords. Right now, it is using let because they are predicting this variable will be changing going forward in the code flow. So if you have any variable which will never change, you can put it as UN constant or CONST. And apart from that, we have this specific method declaration, which has just console logging inside it. So inside that console logging, you can log that specific variable and get an output. And finally, suppose you have some sort of conditional check and there is a statement, conditional statement, you can use this conditional statement to validate and maybe call this function after that. So it is something like that. And okay, so maybe I'll also go in deeper about like what are types of variables you can declare. Okay, so this is a small snippet which is explaining how you can have multiple variables declared, and var is something which used to be declared earlier before the ES6 thing came in for JavaScript, and that used to be that used to cover the entire scope. Like it's not local one; it's a global scope. Next came the variable declaration standard let. So let falls under local scope, wherein if suppose you're declaring it inside a specific method, you can access it inside the method only. Outside that, it's not that much possible. And also you have this constant way of declaring a variable. So whenever you want to declare a variable which will possibly not change over the period of time, you can declare it as by a constant. And suppose you want to declare an object. So object is basically a JSON. So JSON is something like which has a key value pair, and you can declare an object also with that specific constant. But as you can see, this constant, which I've explained earlier, if you're declaring it for a variable, does not let that variable to be changed going forward. But in case of an object, it's a bit different. If you're declaring it with a constant, you cannot change the entire object value. Like suppose you cannot do anything like my object equals to some other JSON entirely. What you can do is you can specifically reference the content or the keys of that object, like my object.age equals to 31. So you can modify that specific key and update it with a new value. Next comes in like an array. So for arrays also it's a bit similar. As it is an object, array is also an object, but of a different type. Here we were just able to enter the key value pairs, but here we are able to enter all the values one by one. Similarly, like even though it's declared as constant, you can push any value to it or maybe pop a value from it, but you cannot entirely update it at one shot. Like you cannot do my array equals to and the different array declaration itself. That can only be done if you have declared it using a let instead of a constant. Okay, so next thing is about scope and mutability. As you have seen here, based on scope and mutability, you generally decide which or how to declare a variable. So I'll ask questions regarding like what are scope and mutability. Okay. So as I have explained earlier about the scopes and like how you can change a variable. So yeah, changing the value of a variable, the fancy term is mutability or mutation as scope, or like where that specific variable will work is something which defines like the level of access or level of permission that specific variable has. As you can see, where is something which can be declared and accessed throughout any uh, multiple functions or outside the functions as well. And let and constant is basically block scoped. So wherever they are declared, they can only be used in that specific block and inside the nested blocks as well. Mutability, as you can see, all of them are mutable, but as I've explained earlier, just var and let are like entirely mutable, but constant is partially mutable. Okay, so let's ask another follow-up question. Okay, about function. How do we create? What are the different types of creating functions? Okay, so there are quite a lot of ways which a function can be created in JavaScript. So as you can see, this is one type wherein you have the curly braces being used and the normal way how any sort of other functions are getting declared. So this is the very basic one. And next you can have this function expression, this function declared in the form of an expression. So what is happening here is you are declaring a function which is somewhat similar to this one, function greet name, but you do not give the name of a function. You just instantiate it as an object. So this object, whichever gets created, is a function object. So inside that function object is doing the same task, but this object is being stored in this specific variable, which is a constant. So you cannot update this variable fully, but partially you can do if you are able to access the components of function, like the internal parameters or any sort of variables. So once you have this specific greet as an function object, you call that function object and you pass on the specific name and you get an output similar to how it was above. Next move on to the arrow function. So arrow function came into being from the ES6 version. So ES6 is just a standard update on ES5, wherein it came in with quite a lot of different tweaks which helped write much more cleaner code. So yeah, cleaner code is something which you need to focus quite a lot whenever you're trying to write any enterprise grade application. So the more clean your code is, the more maintainable it is, or more visually appealing it is, and also it's understandable. So clean code is something which needs to be focused quite a lot. And as you can see, this is an arrow function. So how this arrow function works, as you can see earlier, we had added one function and then the curly braces after that. But now that function declaration is gone and the curly braces has been shifted a bit with an arrow in between. So this sort of expression is also a type of function declaration, wherein it is much more deeply connected with a scope level declaration. So whenever you are having the specific function declared in this way, you can call it similarly as you used to call, but yeah, this is just a style change. So there is not much in-depth explanation on it, but yeah, from ES6 version, it is recommended you generally use this format whenever you are creating any sort of functions. And this is one more method, like object with, this is one more type of, this is one more way how a function is declared. So it's inside an object. As you can see, person is kind of a JSON object. So that JSON object has key value pairs. One key is name where the value is John, and another key is greet where the value is a function object. So the function object which has been declared here does the same job as it was doing earlier. And once that declaration is done, the function is instantiated. It gets stored as an object under greet. Whenever the specific object is getting called, you just type in person.greet to access the specific key, and of course it will run that or invoke that function as well. And this is a way of declaration, like a constructor function. What is a constructor function? Constructor function is somewhat similar to how we declare constructors for classes, but it's just a function which has another function inside it, or a couple of other functions maybe inside it. And there are a couple of variables declared at the very beginning, which is like this dot name and this dot age. So whenever you are initializing this specific person function, you would be initializing the parameters as well. So we'll be passing name and age as your constructor inputs, as you can see in here. So once you have passed it, your this specific constructor function would be initialized. The object would be instantiated, and you will be having this specific object stored in this constant variable John. So once your object is getting created from the constructor function, you have these two parameters set because you have already passed them. Now what you need to do is you would like to execute this specific function. So how we do it? You call this specific object which has been initialized with the method which you need to call. So as you can see, you need not had to pass these parameters explicitly whenever you're trying to call this specific method. As you have passed it already, it got set initially, and this specific text or variable got updated. Whenever you call, you'll get the same resultant output. This is also a way of how you declare a constructor function. Okay, so next follow-up question would be, okay, so as you can see, my follow-up question was like, of course, I know what are the different types or different ways how which a function can be declared. But how do I know, or when do I use a specific type of declaration whenever I'm trying to work on any JavaScript project? There could be quite a lot of instances wherein you would be quite perplexed to understand, like, okay, should I use this or that? So I think for that purpose, ChatGPT is there to help you out. So you can, as you can see, like suppose normal function declaration, if you go, it can be declared anywhere, it can be called anywhere. That is absolutely true. But you should generally declare this whenever that function is hoisted to the top of its scope. So yeah, that's one reason like why we should be declaring the function the traditional way when it's or when it's required. But generally these are not, this type of declaration is not followed nowadays with the advent of ES6. Okay, so function expression, as you can see, it's like you can use this sort of expressions whenever you want to declare a function that is used in a specific scope or a context. So outside that, I think you should not try using this specific pattern. Arrow functions. The arrow functions are something like, suppose you want to utilize mm, the self content of that specific class, like it has a this and you want to use that. So in that case, you can use an arrow function. And also, suppose you have you don't have that much of complex body or multiple statements for a specific function. At that time also you can use this specific type of declaration. And for method one, it's like when you define it as a property of an object, or you want to define it, you can use it. Like you want to have some sort of JSON and you want to have a function inside that. At that time you can use this, and it can also have some reference to that this keyword, which will help give it much more deeper access on how this specific thing will be working. So constructor function is like suppose you want to create multiple instances of the same object, and you cannot copy paste that same code throughout the entire code base and make it cluttered. So what you do at that situation, you use constructor functions. Once you are using that, it will make your code a bit more cleaner as well. Okay, so these were the types of functions that can be declared. Anybody has any questions so far?
Hello, sir.
regarding this? Yes.
Sir, can you please show the example in any code editor?
Yes, I can show that example. This one?
Yes.
Okay. Code editor, I guess I have to set it up. I think code editor, I'll have to set it up using Node.js and all, so that will take a bit of time. So I'll keep that for later on. But any
Sir,
information
can I
related?
use Sublime Text or VS Code?
Yes, you can use both of them, but as it's JavaScript, you need to have a JavaScript transpiler running. So you can use Node.js for that purpose. You can set up Node, and then directly you can copy paste this code and run there. Or if you want to test it in a way, like suppose you want to run it in the web as a web application, you can create an simple HTML page and add these type of function declaration inside the JavaScript tag or the script tag and run that as well, that HTML standalone. So yes, you can do it that way as well. But of course, I'll also be preparing one hands-on session with using the VS Code and the code editor in the next session when we have it. So during that time, I'll also be demonstrating extensively on like what the code snippets which I get from ChatGPT, how do we validate that, whether it really makes sense or not. So yes. You have any other questions, or anybody has any other questions? If not, okay. If not, then I'll move on to the next part, which is like object declarations. So there are quite a lot of objects, and there are quite a lot of ways in which you can manipulate the object. So I'll just write in a question. The very basic question is like, okay, so as you can see, this is a very simple object, which is kind of a JSON, but not entirely a JSON because it has a function declared here. So of course that has some purpose, but till here, as you can see, can be an absolute JSON or JSON object. So there are quite a lot of ways or like quite a lot of operations methods associated with object manipulation. So it's always necessary or important to understand like what all operations can be done on an object so that we can get our things working much more faster. Suppose one very simple example is if you have this specific JSON and maybe you want to iterate through this specific array, or maybe I'll give a better example with just a JSON array. Okay, so this is a JSON array. As you can see, it has multiple JSONs inside an array. So suppose you were asked to iterate through, not iterate, to go through this specific array and give us the name of the city where Bob lives. How would you do it? Let's see. Let's ask ChatGPT for that. Okay, so yeah. So what I was trying to focus on is like, as you can see, this is one way of how you can iterate through this entire JSON array and give me an entry which matches exactly with what I've asked for. This this code might look really good enough, but much optimized. So let me ask for an optimized version of this code and see what it returns. Okay, so as you can see, it has optimized quite a lot. It has used the JavaScript object method, which is find. So four line of code got constricted into just one line, and of course, this has been tested quite well for its performance, and it is guaranteed to provide a really good performance when you run this. So besides find, there are quite a lot of other things which can also be used as this array method, this specific JSON method. Let me try to find out what all methods are there for JSON manipulation or object manipulation. Yes, so any sort of JSON object has quite a lot of methods, which comes in very handy whenever you are trying to do a couple of complex tasks and you don't want to write too many lines of code. So as you can see, JSON.stringify is something which converts an entire JSON object into a JSON string. JSON.parse is something like you have a JSON string and you want to convert it back to a JSON object. You run this method and it will give you a JSON object back from a JSON string. Object.keys gives you back the keys that are present for the specific JSON object. Like there's a key, there are key value pairs, and so we'll just return the list of keys or array of keys. And for values, if you call this method, it'll return the array of values. So suppose there is an array, and it could be a JSON array or any sort of array, and you just want to validate whether it is really an array or its type has changed or something is not proper. So you can call this method like isArray. If it is an array, it will return true, if not false. So array.prototype.for each. So as you all know, we can use a for loop to traverse through an array. But in order to traverse in a much more efficient and optimized way, there is this for each method. So whenever you are trying to traverse through the array, you can use this optimized method and easily traverse through the array. Apart from that, there is a map which is responsible behind updating the specific array and giving us an updated array output. Suppose you have maybe an array which has 1, 2, 3, 4 as its element, and you want to get an array which is having the product of all the elements by 2. So if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, it should return like 2, 4, 6, and 8. So for that purpose, you can do a manipulation inside and maybe use this map method, and it will give you an output. I'll show code snippet examples for each and every one of them using ChatGPT itself. But right now I am just explaining on a high level. Filter is also something which is a part or a method of the array object in JavaScript, wherein suppose you want to filter a couple of specific elements which might match as per your need. So you use this specific method, and when you pass the list of all the things which needs to filter out, it will filter out and give you an appropriate updated array. So reduce is something like, suppose you have an array which has quite a lot of results, quite a lot of entries or elements in it, and you want to get an output based on some functional logic application on top of that array, and which will give a final output with maybe it could be a single value. So reduce comes very handy in that. And finally, it's the includes method, which is generally responsible behind finding out whether a specific element or item is present in that array or not, and accordingly it returns a true or a false. So based on that, I'll be asking ChatGPT for examples in each scenario. Let's start with this one. Okay, so as you can see, this is a JSON object which has all the object related actionable methods and everything in that. So we call this JSON.stringify and pass on this specific object. What we get in return is a JSON string, which is a stringified version of this specific JSON object. So JSON string, why do we need it? What is the use of it? It's JSON string is something like, suppose you have an API, and that API is only capable of receiving strings. It cannot understand JSON objects. So what you'll do is you'll stringify your JSON object and send it to that specific API, and that API once it receives that string, it would be able to convert that string or parse it internally as it wishes to, and maybe use it and read it. So yeah, the next one is JSON.parse. So JSON.parse is the exact opposite of like this JSON.stringify. So I will just copy this again. Okay, so as you can see, there came in a string, JSON string, which looks somewhat like this. And when this was being used to parse the content of that string, after passing through this object, it returns back a JSON object. So JSON object is something which you can use to directly interact with its keys and get the value as well. It's as simple as that. These are also something which I can get the examples for, but yeah, these are pretty simple. as you can see, I just gave an simple, not so correct question, but still it could exactly give me an output. So that's the beauty of ChatGPT. So you can see here we have this JSON object with these keys, and whenever we are trying to get the keys extracted from the specific object, it will extract it and store it in this keys array, and finally when you print it comes. It looks something like this, which will have only the keys present in it. So same for values as well. Just that it would be the values. Okay, so this was about getting the values extracted from the JSON object and showing them up as an array. The main ones which I'll show most, this one is just a method which gives returns back whether it's an array or not accordingly. I'll not go through all of them. I'll go through the important ones which are generally used very widely. So for each, I can also show one example for each. Okay, so as you can see, we have an array which has these elements, and suppose you have to run, if you have to iterate through it, you do it this way. So array.for each will be having our arrow function declared inside it. So you can declare this arrow function somewhere outside also as a variable and then pass the variable inside for each, like whichever method. But this looks way more convenient because it is somewhat similar to the for, and it got updated or optimized and became for each. So this element array element for an array is like it goes through one by one, and this element it's one, then two, and so on. Next, we have thus this array.prototype.map. Filter, reduce, and includes. Okay. So as you can see, as I was mentioning earlier, suppose you have an array which you want to manipulate and multiply a number to it for each and every element. So map is also somewhat similar to for each, when you have this specific number as an element of that array, but the only difference is that it returns an array finally which has manipulated elements inside it. So as you can see, when it will go through one step, it will be multiplying number 1 with 2, update as 2, next 2 with 2, 4, and so on. The next one is filter. Okay, so as you can see, filter, as the name says, it's generally used to filter out specific elements from an array. So what is happening here is whenever array, whenever it
Hello,
iterates
sir.
through an array, yeah.
Sir, I
Hello.
don't have a little bit knowledge about JavaScript, but you
Okay.
cannot show us how to make a hello world program in JavaScript.
Okay, sure.
How to add two numbers in JavaScript? You cannot show us.
Okay, so as you can see, this is a web application that is getting created. So suppose you have a file like index.html and you have the specific HTML content. So you can add this line to it and you can run it as well. So maybe I'll just create this one and show. Okay, so this is a very simple index.html file, and as you can see, this console log is being used here. So I'll just try to run this one. Okay, so you can see there is a hello world coming on the top. I don't know this. Okay, so let me explain why the code. So as you can see, we have a title mentioned. So it's a very simple HTML, and we have a title mentioned wherein we have this hello world defined here, and there is a script which runs and gives us the specific output of hello world. So as it is a console logging happening, so you won't see anything on this white part. You will see the content inside console. So how do I get into this? Right click, inspect, and then I came to console. So if I reload this page, it will print once again. So let me update the content. You can see it has updated. So this way you can also test any sort of JavaScript content which you write, and it will be showing up here. So let me try and show one more example using this one only. Suppose I want to execute this. Let me see if it works. What I'll do is I'll go here, update it there. Whenever you're writing any sort of clean code, make sure the code is linted well. Yeah. So you can use a linter configured for your VS Code. I'll also explain how to do that when we get into much more deeper hands-on coding. So let me see if this one works out. Yeah, it does work out. So we have 2 and 4 coming in, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is there. Whichever is an even number, it would show up. So output should be 2, 4, and here we have 2 and 4. So yes. Are there any questions like apart from this? Hello? Can't hear you.
কি বলি দেখি যাবে এদিকে যাবো বাইকে যাচ্ছা আলা ফোনে খেয়ে নাই ফাল্গুনি প্লিজ মিউট
Okay, so we can proceed. Then I'll show for the other ones. Filter was done, so we'll move next on to reduce. So as I was mentioning, we will pretty much face this issue where if it's idle for a while, it might break. So I'll check new chat. Maybe this will also not work. I have to refresh this. This will also not work. Let's see if we can continue from here. Yes, that's good. Okay. So as you can see, this one is a code for reduction or reduce of reduction of an array, or the reduce method. So when you are calling this reduce method, you would be passing an accumulator and a current value. So accumulator is something like which holds in the manipulated data of like whatever has been coming in from that specific array elements. As I mentioned, reduction is a process wherein you reduce the entire set into just one single output. So the single output would be stored inside this accumulator variable, and whenever you are using this accumulator in this specific state, what happens is this operation accumulator plus current value. Current value is something which is coming from here. So current value is 1 for the first step, 2, and so on. But accumulator is something like when you're doing a return, this accumulator gets updated. So at the very beginning, when we are in this state, the accumulator value is 0. Once it moves on to the next step, it becomes accumulator equals to accumulator plus current value becomes 1. So on and so forth, moving forward, it will go on accumulating, and finally, the final return would not be going back to accumulator, it would be going back to sum. So once this goes back to sum, you are able to get this value as an output. So accumulator, of course, as you have said 0 here, the initial value would be 0. But if you want to set something else as an initial value or some other expression as an initial value, you can put it here as well. So this is how the reduce function works for an array. We can also run that code in HTML script, but yeah, it's all the same. The output is also available here. Okay, so this one, the final one. Okay, so yeah, it's as simple as it looks. Basically, it just checks for an element which is whether if it's present in a specific array or not, and gives true or false accordingly. As you can see, if it's whether it has 3 or 6, and accordingly it has given a true or false. So that was it in a nutshell about various array manipulation methods or functions that can be used in order to make your code clean and much more optimized and efficient as well. So anybody has any questions regarding this? Anybody wants to see any hands-on implementation on a specific part, which I've demonstrated in ChatGPT, but also you want to see it in the web console log? Okay. If there are no questions, I would understand everybody has understood everything, or everybody has understood nothing. So yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to the next part, which is I'll go back to the presentation. Okay, so yeah, this is what we are focused on at this moment, which is setting up of a development environment for JavaScript. So as you saw just now, I created a very small JavaScript application using the web application format, wherein my HTML has a JavaScript code inside it, and when it runs, it is capable of showing that output on the screen. So as this session is only focused on JavaScript, so I would not be creating any components, UI components using JavaScript or much of backend components. But yeah, a little bit of backend part will be included because as we are focused also on creating really clean code and efficient code, we need to understand how we can write efficient code in JavaScript when we are using Node.js. Okay, so this question, let me ask ChatGPT, like, Okay, so yeah, as I have mentioned already, we need three main components. One is the IDE, where you would be developing your code. The next is a web browser, so where you would be testing your web application, or maybe you can use applications like Postman and all to test out your Node.js application, which is a server-side one, without using a web browser. So web browser is mostly for testing out UI components in JavaScript, but for Node.js testing, you not use a web browser. You can use Postman for that purpose as well. So once you're done setting up Node.js web browser and integrated development environment like VS Code in your system, you are good to proceed forward. So as you can see, like this is a very simple example. It's almost similar to like what I have created just now, but it's a bit different. How is it different? You can see the scripting is not being done inside the HTML itself. So why is it a good pattern? It is a good pattern because suppose you have an HTML page which has a very long or a very big JavaScript defined in it and written in it. Anytime you want to do any sort of change, you want to extend something or update something, you have to always go inside that index HTML and do your changes, which is again anti-pattern and goes against the design principles and design patterns of software development. I'll be discussing about why design patterns and design principles are so important. So yeah, that will be coming up later on in the advanced stages when we are much more deeper into the specific topic. So as you can see, this is a script which has been created externally. So I guess they have not given an example of the script. As you can see, it was not to give any example because we did not specifically ask for it. So I'll ask for that as well. Okay, so a very simple example, which is console.log, which we have also earlier done. What I'll do is I'll use this script tag and try to edit here and maybe perform that operation somewhere elsewhere. So just find a Okay, so now it looks better. We have an index.html. An index.html file here. I'm just rename this. Then we have a JavaScript file. So just for the time being, name it myscript.js. So myscript.js I will be referring here. So as it is in my root location, I can remove all this content before that. And let's see if it is capable of recognizing it. If not, then of course I have to give the full path. This content. Beginning as well. Okay, so it has been moved. So could not find it. Once again. Okay, so as you can see, it has been able to recognize the external file and also has done all the JavaScript manipulations. Of course, we have isolated them now. So yes, this was a small example on how we can create or set up a very simple development environment in order to test our JavaScript related code. And also it's just for the web application part, and on backend or server side related application development, you can of course set up the Node.js environment and use that as well to run. So yeah, so I think this was a very small introduction about the important topics of JavaScript. There are quite a lot also to move forward, but for now, I'll end my session here and I'll give it over to Falguni to continue with the next part of this session. Falguni, over to you.
Hey guys, thank you, Archman, for the great session we had and for explaining everything in so detail. Guys, if you have any queries, you can ask about the session, any doubts. If you have, you can clarify it out right now. Archman is here with us, and anything, any query you are getting related to the course or whatever you have been taught from past 2 hours, let us know. We are available with you guys and we are happy to help. So if you guys don't have any doubts, we can move to few more things for your own help. Okay, so I believe all of you heard of our platform, Cracking IT Jobs. Let me share my screen. All right. Okay. Right. So can you guys see? I believe everybody can see. So guys, please speak up. I mean, if you have any doubts or anything, you can also raise your hand. You can send text. We would happy to help. Okay. So this is Cracking IT Jobs. In this, we have various things like you can actually come and test your skill through our coding club platform. You can apply for jobs. You can see whatever doubts you have, whatever queries you have, like, related to the coding. So let's say you completed JavaScript session for next 4 weeks. After that, you can check out, you can come and you can see that how much prepared you are by giving the exams, whatever exams we have. Also, you can see a lot of jobs have been posted in this platform. If you go to all jobs, you can see there are a lot of jobs. We have our own people who we want to hire. Some other companies, they also wants to hire. Also, we have some other job requirements in-house. Those also we will post every now and then, which will keep you guys updated and keep checking that whether your profile fits to this or not. So let's say recently we posted this reactjs developer job. So we need a requirement, like we need 2 people who can actually write some maintainable code, some actually self-managed proper code and everything they can do. So those kinds of people we need on reactjs, where we have some live projects, we have big team on that. They will work with them, they will learn. So in this, you can see what we need. So all those things are mentioned here. We need reactjs, html, css basics, but you need to understand what is reactjs, how it works, how git works, how you can actually create a file, all those things, right? So if you see all the details can be seen here, then you can go and apply, and it will take you to your student portal. You can register there. So student portal, you can go and you can register actually from learn.crackingitjobs.com. You can create your profile, you can sign up, you can do all kinds of things. You can also give exams here. and you can apply all the jobs. You can even from this portal also you can see all the jobs, whatever posted in the cracking IT jobs. You can do this. You can see, and you can see. I mean, see if you go here, you can see these programming languages, this programming and data structure. You need to take 3 exams: analytical ability, you can take test, you can do practices, and all kinds of things you can do. Once you have done, once you are clear with all those things, and if you meanwhile if you face any kinds of doubts, any queries, you can ask us. We are there to help you. Along with it, there are certain jobs for JavaScript developers also. You can check them out. You can try out. You can, if you face any kinds of problem while giving the exams also, you can ask us. We will help you. Okay. All right. So I believe anybody, if no one is having any queries, I can wait for 2 more minutes. If anybody is having any queries, then we can end the session for today. Also, the links have been shared on this chat also. You can do that. And if you have anything, okay, okay, Dirko, he wants to ask something. One moment. Okay. Go
Sir,
on. Yes.
sir, there is one girl in the class who could not attend today's class and she has not registered for ChatGPT because she was not present in the class yesterday. And due to some of her personal problems, she could not attend the class today, but she wants to register. So is it possible?
Yes, it is possible. So whoever wants to join, whoever your friends and they wants to join, only we have this week for this batch till next Friday. They can join. They can actually enroll this class and do all the formalities. From the next class, after that, next Saturday we will have again another class. After that, no other new people we can accommodate in this batch. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, guys. So since I believe no one is having any more queries, we can end the session today. And any more doubts, if you have, you can ask us. We have our WhatsApp group. We can do that. Or Archisman, I wanted to ask you, do you want to give any kinds of assignment to them?
Hello. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I am planning to give assignments, but I'm not yet ready with the assignment. So once that is ready, I'll be sharing it with you. Maybe you can share it with the
All right. So share it with me.
batch.
I'll be sharing with them. Okay. All right.
Okay, sure.
Okay. All right then. Okay, guys. Thank you. Thank you for joining this course and have a good day. Bye.